Welcome to Slash Forward. In this episode, we're going to bring clowns into the modern age, offering them the reverence they deserve with the 2017 adaptation of It. Let's get to it. We open on a rainy, gloomy day in Derry, the weather here representing what living in Derry does to one's brain. We see Bill sick, making a special treat for his little bro Georgie. Since nothing good comes without sacrifice, Georgie is tasked with venturing into the cellar for some wax. A chore he hates, mostly due to his mom insisting on playing him down with ominous piano music. He does soil his dungarees, but otherwise manages to accomplish his task without incident. So Bill gets her watertight and sends him on his way. The SS Georgie takes off like a speedboat running dual 454s, you know? And after Georgie gets clotheslined, he loses his ship down a storm drain. But no worries, a pair of kind eyes appear, and they're attached to everyone's friend, Pennywise the dancing clown, creeping it up in the gutter like an absolute pro. He gets Georgie laughing and draws him in, ripping off his arm and leaving behind nothing more than a bloody smear on the pavement. We then catch up with our friends, starting with Mike at the sheep farm, where part of his duties include being pressured into destroying creatures, which is analogous with life, so pick a side. And then on to Eddie, Bill, Richie, and Stan, living a more carefree life, only concerned about the intricacies of circumcision. We also meet Beverly in the bathroom, getting doused with wet garbage. This happens to be the last day of school, and Bill expresses his desire to spend the summer at the Barrens, searching for his brother's body. Henry Bowers and crew also show up here, letting Bill know the moratorium on bullying due to his missing brother is now over. Around back, Beverly runs into Ben, initially giving him a hard time, but softening when she realizes he's a hopeless mess, rocking out to NKOTB, which is like One Direction, but for mommies. She signs his yearbook, and he proceeds to jizz in his pants, searching quickly for a smooth departing line.
Please don't go, girl.
Nah. Don't do that. Introductions behind us, it's time to get to the hard stuff, as Mike dips into an alley to deliver some succulent meats. He's then distracted by an alarming and apparently supernatural episode that almost gets him killed, as this version of Bowers starts at a 9 and only goes up from there. Meanwhile, at Temple, we see Stan scolded by his father for failing to excel at his recitations. He returns the Torah to its shelf and is startled to find his least favorite artwork is no longer in its frame. It's trying its hand at performance art, giving him a toothy grin as he runs from the room. Later, as the boys head out on their adventure, we see them zip by the library where Ben is doing some research into the dark past of Derry. He runs across an interesting printing error in his book before being lured into the stacks by a balloon and a trail of hot eggs, which is, coincidentally, the name of a medical condition from which I suffer. He finds himself penned in by a headless child who chases him around the archives. He hops out of the fire and into the frying pan, as Bowers takes a keen interest in them titties. Wanting to claim him for later, he begins to actually carve his name into Ben's belly. So Ben executes a flawless crescent kick and gets a lead when the bullies are sidetracked by Henry losing his knife after he falls down the hill. Downriver, the boys are dicking around, splashing in the town's gray water and deciding whether or not they want to actually have an adventure. When Bill finds a piece of evidence belonging to a missing classmate, the decision is made for them when Ben crosses their path. We then watch Mini Adam Driver arrive at the storm drain and finds Pennywise doesn't play too many games when tender flesh wanders so willingly into its domain. In town, the boys have taken Ben to the pharmacy, where Eddie really shines. They run into Beverly, who, favor for favor, uses her feminine wiles to distract the pervy pharmacist, allowing them to abscond with their supplies as she grabs a pack of smokes. Bill invites her to the quarry the next day before they split up. Back at home, we get our first view of her disturbing relationship with her father, who doesn't approve of her maturing into a young woman, grossing her out to the point where she's compelled to spite him by cutting her hair short. The next day, the boys are working up the courage to cliff dive into the quarry when Bev arrives and bosses up, both impressing them and causing them to deeply regret their underwear choices at the same time. The adolescents then share a magical summer afternoon of water sport fun. Richie starts diving into Ben's research, which indicates that people in Derry disappear at a rate many times the national average. He invites them to his room for more educational fun, displaying some older maps and information about previous periods of disappearances that interest Bill. When done, we find it's Eddie's turn as the local crack house calls out to him, startling him into dropping his pills. He's helped by a kindly leper who shepherds him onto the property where Pennywise tries to bring him on as a roommate by promising him the master suite and the advantage of floating. When Beverly gets home, she finds a poem from her secret admirer and hopes that assuming it was written by Bill will make it true. She's summoned to the sink by tiny voices that identify themselves as the missing children, who are apparently just hanging out under the pipes, floating and chilling. When she tries to check to reassure herself, the drain erupts into a cloud of hair and blood, causing significant moisture damage to the drywall, but remains completely invisible to her father. Bill wakes up that same evening to strange footfalls down the hallway. He's startled by a full-on apparition of Georgie leading him into the basement. He finds the basement set up in the style now most familiar to Georgie, waterlogged, and Georgie does his best to convince Bill to join him. However, we see he's just a puppet of Pennywise, moving his lips like an amateur and getting Bill all riled up to make that soul nice and tender for his later feast. Beverly summons the gang the next day, taking a huge risk by having them come into her home so she can verify she's not crazy. The test is positive as they see it as well, leading to an epic biological hazard cleanup montage. This is where Beverly and Bill solidify their relationship as best buds with romantic potential. As they head down the road, they all feel more confident in opening up about their personal experiences this summer, all different but connected by the clown. With Richie the only one left out, they're distracted by noises coming from the woods and indications of trouble brewing. Mike is by the riverbed, taking it both physically and mentally. He's about to get brained, so the kids draw first blood, and rather than simply standing off, they ramp it up with a classic childhood activity. Despite their size advantage, the bullies find themselves overwhelmed by superior numbers and are stunned at taking their first L. The gang then talks more about their missing peers, connecting Ben's research with Mike's knowledge of local legend. It's suggested that all their visions are connected to a single entity that aims to use what they fear most against them. These periods of turmoil eventually end, but return on a 27-year cycle. Mike also initiates himself into the club by revealing he's had visions. Related to that time, he had to listen to his family as they burned alive. With a new direction, they go back to Bill's house to break out the old carousel and map their modern data with the old town roads, discovering that disaster sites throughout history are connected by the sewers and old well house, which had been located at the current site of the town crack house. When they start freaking out, we witness a similar phenomenon to what Ben experienced with his book, but with a butthole-puckering finale. Bill heads for the house on Neibolt immediately, which forces his friends to follow or risk him going missing. He points out that they're all at risk all the time if they choose to do nothing. Bill, Richie, and Eddie constitute the away team, entering the house and heading upstairs to explore a distress signal. Eddie is distracted by a personal call to action, splitting them off enough to become fully separated. And then a brief spook is all that's required to get Eddie to go for the hardcore championship belt. While he goes ahead and takes a breather, upstairs Bill and Richie continue to walk through doors for some reason, getting individualized haunt house experiences tailored to their fears. In Richie's case, clowns. Luckily, the experience is startling enough to drive him out of the room. Downstairs, Pennywise emerges alarmingly from the mini-fridge and spends little time seasoning his treats. He's about to get off on that good stuff when Bill and Richie push past their most recent horrors by reiterating that none of this is real, causing Pennywise to become momentarily distracted. He tries to demonstrate his interest in keeping it real when Beverly impales his head with an iron picket, causing half his face to go wonky. Poor Ben can't go more than a few days where his tummy remains unmolested, and they eventually drive it off as it slithers down the old well. Fun time is now mostly over as Bill is ready to get right back into it, but the group diverges into two distinct schools of thought on the value of living, and they officially divide despite their strength in numbers. We then get a montage showing everyone moving on with their summer, and things getting mostly back to normal, which is actually pretty bad for Bowers. He's just trying to hang with his friends and have some fun, prompting his dad to teach him a lesson and reveal his inner smallness in front of his buds. At his lowest, Pennywise offers him a purpose, presenting him both a fine gift and a mandate. Without question, he finds his napping papa, approaches him, crotch moist with urine, and opens an artery while cheered on by the kiddos. Beverly has a similar escalation at home, going to leave and finding the house locked from the inside, and her dad lurking in the shadows. He's upset by rumors going about town of his delicate flower running the streets with some boys, and feels that his suspicions are confirmed by the poem he found. Wanting her for himself, they get into a scuffle, and she eventually pushes his wig back with a toilet tank lid before being nabbed by Pennywise. Bill goes to her house, usually a bad idea, but finds Daddy's melon split wide open with evidence of its involvement. So he assembles the crew and they head to the crack spot. In this version, the kids gather some actual tools of slaughter before entering. As they descend into the pit of despair, we see Beverly waking up from the gentle pitter-patter of a stranger's blood on her face. She finds herself at the base of operations for Pennywise, where all the floaters go, and she's given an energetic little show before it reveals the deadlights. Topside, before they can all climb down, Bowers shows up. He tackles Mike and almost puts a bolt through his frontal lobe, which would have been hell for Mike's impulse control. And since he set the stakes, he then has to suffer the consequences as Mike spears him down the well. Holy shit! That is the exact right response. While waiting on Mike, Stan gets distracted and split from the group. When they eventually find him, we learn he's got that yummy yum. Aw, good for you, Stan. As they calm him, and despite the immediacy of this lesson, Bill is drawn away by a vision of Georgie. He eventually finds himself at the flotation station with Beverly, but is compelled to continue on. The others arrive and find Beverly as well. They pull her down and Ben tries to bring her back with the power of true love, which works, even if one-sided. They find Bill having a heart-to-heart with Georgie, and he demonstrates what he's willing to sacrifice to rid them of Pennywise. We then get the rare and magnificent opportunity to witness a clown birth in the wild, as Georgie goes through a sort of post-mortem puberty. They then get into your standard clown fight situation, going back and forth with biting from both sides. It tries to make a deal. Bill, in exchange for the opportunity to lead happy lives. Recognizing its lie, as no one is ever truly happy, they reject it and take turns getting in their licks as it changes forms to match its target like a boggart. At this point, these visions enrage the kids rather than instilling fear, and it ultimately has no choice but to slide gently into the abyss. The following month, we find them sorting through things as the brain fog begins to roll in. Beverly had a dream about them all together as adults. They're unsure of what this means, but Bill initiates a blood oath to come back if it ever returns, which is equal parts epic and disturbing. As they disperse, we learn Beverly is the first to leave Derry. She's going to live with her aunt after killing her father, and Bill summons all of his courage for a goodbye kiss, thus punctuating this coming-of-age saga. And that was the 2017 interpretation of It, a movie unusually devoid of flashbacks. If you enjoyed the video, I'd love for you to become a part of the channel by subscribing. Thanks for watching.